I hear music. John is a real interesting character. We once did a show together at the Unity Church in Omaha, and he had this song. He's written a lot of really interesting, I won't say sacrilegious songs, but he has a song called Beer versus Religion. A song, oh gosh, what was the one? We went to the Unity of Omaha. I said, oh, John, you got to play that song, Beer versus Religion. And he goes, I can't play that in a church. And I said, sure you can. They're just all recovering Catholics. I got a kick. Anyway, a lot of fun. He also is, one of his other songs that I really enjoy is a song called The Wiccan Quarterback. Anyway, he's an interesting guy. Well, last week Mark calls me at the very end of the service. He says, Chris, call me. And, so I called him back and he says, we were going to eventually talk about Islam versus Christianity this week. And he says, oh, the guy talked about it this week. He says, so can you do something different? And I said, yeah. So I thought about spirituality in America. That's a real big topic for a lot of us. And if we go to the next slide, well, there's, who's got the little gadget? We'll go to the next one after that, I'm sorry. We, as a country, are worshipers. We can see that these are weekly worshipers. There's 56 million people every week in this country that go to church. Now, the funny thing about this statistic, if you broke it down, it's about 19% of the whole total population. But this is considered to be a pretty accurate amount of people who actually go to church every Sunday. However, when people are polled, about 40% say they do. So 20% of the people who say that they go to church every Sunday actually don't. But these are pretty solid numbers put together from churches and some other details. There are 300,000 churches in this country. 300,000 churches in this country. And we can see there's a vast and varied sizes of churches. Most of them are, between 100 and 500 people. 25 million people attend those churches. You have a church of 10,000 plus. I tell you, that would be something to see on a Sunday morning, wouldn't it? What's amazing about these numbers is, if you like statistics, which I personally love statistics, at the end of Apostle Paul's missionary work, there was only estimated to be 2,000 Christians in the whole world. This was right after the life of Jesus, and Paul's missionary work was sometime from around the year AD 35 until around the year AD 60. And he went through 2 missionary journeys, and he was somewhat of a strategist, because he decided that one of the ways to really promote Christianity was to actually promote Christianity in some of the port cities. And so that's why Antioch was such a big area for him, is that it was a multicultural place, a hub where the influence of Christianity could be preached and it could be spread throughout the whole Mediterranean region. It was a great springboard for him to reach there. And so that's how Christianity began to come into the Roman Empire. And then you have other influences, that you have world leaders who became Christian, and they decided that that it was their way or the highway. And so you had the heavy hand of leadership leading a lot of people into Christianity and believing in Christianity as the official religion. And if you believed anything else, then you were executed. And then you had the influence of the Pope and the church is the way it developed. And you had the heavy-handedness of the Pope, who said, you have to do this or you're going to be cast into hell and things like that. So there was a lot of factors that really helped amplify and multiply and grow Christianity to what we have today. It's estimated that not only in this country but around the world, there's about 2 billion Christians in the world. It's literally about 1/3 of the world's population is of the Christian faith. It's certainly part of our essence. We are built around spirituality. It's such a part of our life. It's not only spirituality in America, but spirituality around the world. There's probably 90% of the people in the world believe in some kind of a God, some kind of an entity. And it was like it was inbred in us. If we go to the next slide, I want to show you this very interesting archaeological site. This is a place in Turkey called, I'm sorry you can't see it, it's Göbekli Tepe. This was discovered sometime around the year 1994. And the significance of this archaeological site was, prior to this site being found, scholars believed that churches and worship came together after the formation of communities. What they have found interesting about this site was that this was a site that was put together by the hunter-gatherers, people who weren't in community, people who decided that they wanted to come together as individuals and worship. And it's sort of flipped the whole thing upside down. We have built our communities around where we worship. This was the first archaeological find that really indicated that in a great way. It's considered one of the most significant archaeological finds in the last 100 years for its sociological reasons. Primitive religions and even Christianity, we have always got things from prior religions. It's like it's been an evolution. Of course, back in the prehistoric times, and it's estimated, and it's that man, when they worshiped God, they saw God in a different way. God was the God of the wind, and God was the God of the water, and God was the God of fire. And this is how people saw God. And they had this awe of nature, and they wanted to try to understand, and they wanted to somehow pay tribute and pay homage to this power. And they started to erect temples, and they started to perform rites and things that could allow them to align with this power, this God that was out there, that was making the wind blow, that was making the fire burn, that was making the water flow. It was also a common belief in the prehistoric times that anything that happened on earth was also happening in the heavens. This is a pretty common thing. That's why you see in Greek mythology, which I love Greek mythology. Anybody else here love Greek mythology? I love Greek mythology. When I found that in school, I think it was in 5th grade when I started reading about mythology, all of the different Greek mythology stories, and I just became, enthralled with those stories. I just loved bringing the Trojan horse into the city and let the guys out. It was just amazing to me. But anyway, the belief is that everything that was happening on earth was also happening in heaven. So if man was at war on earth, there was a war going on in the heavens. There was an important theologian back in the day, and don't even know if you call him a theologian. I guess it was just someone who put forth an idea. His name was Zoroaster. And Zoroaster was the first monotheist. He was a guy that said, it's really not God's will for us to keep fighting forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. There's got to be a final conflict. There's got to be a day where we lay down our swords and we're finally at peace. And his God, Ahura Mazda, was the God that he believed was the supreme God of all gods. And Ahura Mazda would not let man continue to fight forever. That Ahura Mazda would step in and there would be a coming of justice, and there would be a retribution for all of those who have done wrong, and that peace would finally be upon the landscape, and that man would live in eternity with Ahura Mazda on the plains of what is now known as Russia. So this belief that we have in this eternal existence predates Christianity by thousands of years. The idea of a final conflict predates Christianity by thousands of years. Zoroastrianism is still a practiced religion, but it is also more or less the grandmother of Hinduism as well. It's one of those that predates some of the even ancient religions of Hinduism. So we've been dealing with this idea of the final conflict and the end of the world since we can remember. So I thought it would be fun to go back and just see in the last 12 years, since 2000, take a guess how many end-of-the-world scenarios that we've already lived through since 2000. Any guesses? 20. Actually, this one coming up on Friday will be the 20th. But, this is just going back to the year 2000. I grew up, there was a book that I saw, and I hate to say it, but I was at an age where I was 16 years old, and I was at a friend's house, and laying on his table was a book that said Christ by 1988. And I thought, oh my God, I've only got 8 years to live. I was entrenched in a very rigid faith that believed in the end times, and that I have to say that my father, God love him, is still one of those people who believes that the world's going to, quote, end before he passes away. He's 75 years old, and he believes that God's going to come back before he dies. This is what I grew up with. This is what I was taught, and so I'm not really blaming myself for feeling this way. It's what I believed. But it really, actually, I really thank that book, because if I really didn't have that book to reflect on, I wouldn't have been so panic-stricken, and I wouldn't have been so fear-based that I wouldn't have started maybe studying the Bible just a little bit more. So as much as I disagree with every word in the book, I'm grateful for it. Because without that, I don't think I would have ever given religion a second thought. I was scared. I really, truly was scared. And I kept thinking in my mind, what started the wheels to turning was, how could I, in the next 8 years of my life, do everything I want to do? Accomplish everything I want to accomplish? And I had a tremendous amount of anxiety over this for a couple of months. To where I couldn't sleep some nights. When I finally started saying, well, what if it's wrong? And I even got to the point where it was so wrong that I became an atheist for about 10 years. Like, it's a bunch of garbage, every bit of it. Every word of it's just garbage. But I think, dealing with some of the end of the world things, remember Y2K? Here, let me see if I have some of the dates here. Of course, there was Harold Camping, the guy who, in May 21st, 2011, remember this? I was in Iowa at the time. I was serving the church up in Ames, Iowa. And I remember as I was going to the church, on the interstate, there was actually a billboard that said the world was ending on May 21st. And it was one of those digital billboards, and I wanted to get an ad right after it, and say, it's BS, don't listen to the previous ad, Let's see, there was some that sort of stuck out. Oh, the one that stuck out to me that was prior to 2000 was back in 1982, our dear friend Pat Robertson swore that the world was going to end. Now, this is a man who ran for president. Pat Robertson has predicted the end of the world on 2 separate occasions. I think there was another time in 2006 that he said that the world was finally going to come to an end. And I hate to tell you guys that this next Friday, this isn't the last scare. We've got another major asteroid and comet that's going to be coming down on us and is going to be scaring us into about the year 2028, I think it is. And then there's some other predictions way far out in the future. I mean, yeah, there's probably in the next 50 years, there's another good 4 or 5 that are already predicted, and that doesn't count for anybody who's come up with some new mathematical formula that's going to crop up in the future and that is going to make the news. I'm 100,000% sure that I'll wake up on Saturday morning and have my coffee. But what is real about these events? What is real is what people believe and how it does affect them. And as we look at the events that happened in Connecticut on Friday, much people with their understanding of God would say, well, this is one of the signs. This is one of the things that's going to happen, and there's going to be earthquakes, and there's going to be this, and there's going to be that, and this is just one in a long line of things that's going to happen that, it's really real to them. It's really real. As ridiculous as it may seem to most of us, there are some that are consumed in fear. I have a coworker at Silent Unity whose daughter is consumed in fear over this next Friday. And some would say, what's the world coming to? Look at the world. Look at the status of the world. How can somebody go into a classroom and open fire on innocents? And folks, I want you to trust my words here just for a moment, because I have 3 children. I have a granddaughter. I would fight to the death for any of them. And if that happened to me or anybody I knew, I would even be more devastated. I'm devastated already for the families of those who were affected by this tragedy. But I'm not affected to the point that I do not believe in the goodness of mankind and the good that is within people. Working at Silent Unity the other day, we actually had the media call. I'd never heard that happening. It was pretty interesting. They actually called and said, what do you get? They wanted a statement from Silent Unity about this tragedy. What do you tell people that are praying to God? And people call up and said, why did God let this happen? And why did this happen? And what's going on? And people wanted answers. They wanted to know. If we can go to the next slide. They wanted to know why this happened. Oh, there's the end of the world. Is that a Twinkie? Well, they're extinct now too, so. Go to the next slide. Now, these are some of the images we were faced with on Friday. You can see the children being let out of the school. We can see the woman frantic, trying to maybe wonder if her child's alive, maybe tell somebody that their child has passed. I don't know. I mean, I don't know who that was. But certainly devastated and affected. Who saw Obama speak? Very, very moving. And unfortunately, I mean, it was so authentic. I mean, it was just really, I say unfortunate because there's so much conjecture in politics, and hate to see something like this really just level everybody, to bring them back to square one. But I was very moved by his commentary. The Sandy Hook School. People, put this guy down here, what did they do? They prayed. People came to the aid of these people who were affected. People who needed love, and they needed comfort, and they needed support. And that support and that love that they gave far outweighed the tragic moment. It doesn't make it any less tragic. But what's not given any attention is that this man in the right corner, that is the true essence of who we are. In spirituality in America, 73% of people in this country are of the Christian faith. 20% of us go to church every Sunday. That's who we are. We're not some rogue gunman going into a school that just doesn't care about innocence anymore. No, that is not who we are. But with the media, it gets lost. It gets buried as the last story. And the best thing we can do as a people is to make it the first story. It's to make it who we are. And to not forget that that is who we are. It doesn't make the tragic events any less sad or any less tragic, but it does not define us. I refuse to believe in anything less than the good of God, and every soul, even the most hardened criminal, has that God light in him. Even that man who pulled the trigger, as misguided and as sad as he was a child of God. And we have to remember that. Yes, he was sick. Yes, he did a heinous thing. Yes, it's a terrible thing. But this is who we are. Millions of people prayed after that event. Millions of people came to the support. There's funds being set up. There's counselors being offered. There's compassion being given. That's who we are. So I wanted to remember that on this Sunday of love, that is the essence of who we are. We are love. The season of Advent, the word Advent means the coming. And let's remember, on this Sunday especially, that we are love. And we are here to create a world, and if there's a world that's ending, let it be the world of chaos and confusion as to who we are. We are love. mistake.